Well, the same is the case with the word fornication. So here's the first point of this sermon. And I want you to get this because it's a bombshell. Tell your neighbor, wake up. This is a bombshell. The Greek word fornication in the Bible does not refer to premarital sex. See, when the Apostle Paul says flee fornication in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, he is not saying flee sex outside of marriage. The word translated fornication in the Bible is the Greek word porneia. It appears about 24 times in the New Testament, and the root word for the word porneia is the Greek word pornos, which means a harlot or a prostitute. Y'all following me? The context of verse 18 begins in verse 13 of 1 Corinthians chapter 6, where Paul says the body is not meant for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Should I therefore take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Do you not know that whatever is united to a prostitute becomes one body with her? Then Paul says in verse 18 to flee fornication. So the entire context of verse 18, church, is about fleeing prostitution. Not fleeing premarital sex.
We are living in a time to where churches and pastors are being exposed. I mentioned this at the beginning of the year, that this is a year of revelation and a year of restoration. God is restoring his church, his body, and he's revealing to us those who are not like us. He's revealing to those who have a form of godliness, but deny the power thereof. He's revealing to us those who preach another gospel. I talk about the church plants all the time. And I talk about them in the context of black liberation theology of preaching a gospel of oppression by saying that black people are constantly oppressed, that the white man has his knee on our neck and we can't do anything unless we beg the federal government to give us the assistance and the ability to do it. I talk about that all the time, these black liberation preachers. This guy, he's a pastor, Pastor Coates, I believe that's his name, a Baptist preacher. He's a black liberation theology preacher too. Because you listen to that message in its entirety, he somehow ties what he's talking about to Donald Trump. He's a black liberation theology preacher. Like I've said before, when you start down that slope of turning your ear to another gospel, you open yourself up to doctrines of devils. It's only a matter of time to where you start preaching things like he's preaching. You may start off talking about we need to be free, we need to be liberated. You may start off there, but you end up talking about how in the Bible, fornication did not mean premarital sex between consenting adults. And what he's really saying, without saying it, and this is what's coming, is that he wants to use that same ideology, some new revelation he got, to say it's okay for a young girl who's consenting to consent with an older man. Pedophilia, MAPS. Minor attracted persons. Oh, that's coming. And the church is going to be at the forefront of it. Black pastors like this who have sold themselves out to another gospel, which is not a gospel. And Paul says, let them be accursed. But we have to address the chief of that. I haven't talked about this pastor in a while. Jamal Bryant. He recently had somebody, Dr. David Johns, on his podcast talking about how the black church does not love queer people. How the black church has hurt queer people. How the black church needs to get its act together when it comes to loving queer people. How black people are not black if they don't love queer people, because queerness is the same thing as blackness. I want to talk about how we need to be mindful of in this day and time to be good stewards. God has called us to be good stewards of what he has given us. And so if you want to incorporate gold and silver and other precious metals into your retirement portfolio, go to thebiblicalconservative.com/gold. thebiblicalconservative.com/gold.
On marketing. That's what he brought me for. It's a collection. I'm sorry, for those of you who don't know, is Bishop O.C. Allen oversees a collection of affirming churches, black affirming churches. So I sit down in the stage, is maybe 700 people, 800 people there. I sit down, Dr. Johns, and look out in the audience. And on the second row is a young man who was a member of my church in Baltimore. At that time, I'd been in Atlanta for 4 years. So I stopped mid-conversation because this little boy had been with me since he was 11, 12.
One of your babies.
Yeah. And I said, we on a panel for 800 people. I said, hey, what you doing in Atlanta?
And I didn't know.
Yeah.
You ain't come by the church.
Yeah. You live here?
Yeah.
So he said, yeah. I said, how long you been here? He said, 3 years. I said, 3 years? And you haven't seen me once?
Yeah.
So he says, no, I'm at Bishop Allen's church. And I, David, apologized to him that I was such a pastor that he couldn't feel comfortable coming to his spiritual covering. I apologized to him for how I treated him, how the church treated him. And it went viral that I had forsaken the gospel.
To show up in love. How about that?
Yeah,
to show up in love.
Yeah, to show up in love and to embrace not even a stranger.
Nah, Jamal Bryant. It went viral because, as it says in Romans 1, it tells us not to affirm behavior that is contrary to God's will. It tells us to do that. And as a pastor, you're supposed to represent God. As a pastor, you're supposed to be a person called to the fivefold office who is not going to let people be tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. But instead, you are gaslighting black churches, gaslighting black Christians to accept perversion as love. That's why it went viral, Jamal Bryant, because what you're doing, you're being used by the enemy, sir. You're doing it intentionally to build up your clout, to make yourself the latest civil rights leader in the black community. You're touching all the bases, and you know you got to get that support from the queer community in the black community. And so therefore, you're doing that stuff. But you don't know what destruction and harm you're causing, what confusion you're creating, sir. That's why it went viral. And another thing, too. Love doesn't mean acceptance. We always hear this stuff. Love, 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 love. Love does not mean acceptance. I love you. I tell you the truth. Ephesians 4:15 says we speak the truth in love. Our lifestyle should be of love and our speech should be of love. Love is telling you the truth. And you are living a lifestyle that leads to your destruction because you're opening yourself up to demonic activity, to demonic entities to take hold and take root and to dominate your life. That's what you're doing.
For us to not have a church that says, come unto Jesus, is the same lie as the Statue of Liberty. Give me those who are yearning to breathe free.
It is all a lie for the pit of white mediocrity hell. 6 months ago, I would have said white supremacy, but words matter. Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, so many of our ancestors help us to appreciate that if we can name our conditions, we can then begin to change them. So I want to name a thing in that regard. It's about mediocrity. 3 points of connection. As the grandson of a Black Baptist preacher from Austin, Texas.
I didn't know that.
I have struggled with at least 2 things in this regard, which is our ability to have incomplete conversations about things that we know are true, like sacredly we know they are true. And a part of how this usually manifests in us church folks joking, we know there are gay folks in the church, right? They're usually where? In the choir, right? Maybe on the liturgical praise dance team. And we will acknowledge that, we will celebrate it, and then we will enforce those boundaries, which is to say, you can come up in this church, but don't try it.
Yeah.
Don't bring too much of yourself.
Yes.
Don't bring your little friend up in here with you.
Yeah.
Right. And I've always struggled with two things, and one is the consequence of us being compelled to go to Sunday school, and I should just step back and acknowledge that the church generally, the Black church more specifically, is both a site of incredible potential and power and tremendous pain for so many of us, especially those of us who identify as LGBTQIA+. You will hear me use same gender loving.
Yes.
I don't use gay because gay is often a white male political identifier.
I suppose you
the
were going
things
to
that people think about.
Yeah.
When they think about gay, they don't think about all this fabulousness,
Yes.
right? They don't think about a Black man
So
who's college
let me
educated.
pause you midpoint, because you got to help us.
Yeah.
Even for the preachers. The appropriate terminology is what?
So I appreciate the question, and appropriate is relative, which is a part of why I know this vexes people who have language fatigue.
Yes.
There are a lot of folks who I engage with who feel like, look, I love you. You can do whatever you want to do, but it's too many terms. My brain can't wrap itself around the they, them, there.
Yeah.
And so I want to acknowledge that I'm complicating that by saying I got something else for you to train your tongue to pronounce.
Yes.
And so same gender loving is a term created by a Black man.
Okay.
To acknowledge that what it means for us as descendants of Africa, who are the progenitors of everything, the creators of cool, but who have had to be forced to endure what Black feminists refer to as the matrix of domination, the signs, systems, and symbols that allow white patriarchy and privilege to be upheld and omnipresent yet hyper invisible at the same time. Those things exist in language. And so Black folks have always struggled to find love, to have the ability to love ourselves, to have the ability to love each other, especially when we think about transatlantic and Pacific enslavement. And so same gender loving is a way for me as a queer Black man to say to everybody, I am proud of the journey the complications, the joy associated with finding love. The ontological origins of the word queer means that which is not in a position of power. So us as Black folks in this country, we are queer. People with disabilities in a country that is ableist are queer. People for whom English is not their first language or this country that their parents are not native to, we are all queer. However, people have made it a synonym for sexual minority status. If only logically, it doesn't work for me when people suggest that we are choosing an additional form of oppression, right? This is usually how it comes up in the church, which is, if that's a thought you have, ask God to pray it away.
Yes.
If that's a thought you have, suppress it and move beyond it. I would ask people until I was blue in the face in church on Sunday, on Tuesday, or Wednesday, why would God make me this way? Just why? And if you can't answer that question for me, why can't you just show up in love?
Again, that's the trick they're using to gaslight Black churches and Black Christians. He posed that question, saying that God made him that way. God did not make you that way. God did not make you to be attracted to another man. That makes no sense. God created them male and female. He created them that way. Adam and Eve. Because of sin and because of perversion, those desires have crept into humanity. God did not make you gay. God did not say, I'm going to create man to be attracted to woman and to other man. That's a lie. You're lying on God. You've been perverted somehow. You've accepted a perverted spirit, a demonic spirit that's caused you to be attracted to another man. Because you have to understand something. The homosexual and lesbian spirit is a strong spirit. And once it gets, and another thing too, people don't understand this. More than likely, he had somebody in his family, somebody in his bloodline that was homosexual. And so that same familiar demon tried him, and he opened the door somehow, some way, or somebody else opened the door for him for that spirit to get in and take root and dominate and control his life. I'm not saying that he's a victim. I'm explaining to you how somebody could be quote unquote gay or same gender loving when they're young. Because somebody opened the door, something he saw on TV, he was around somebody that had that spirit on them, and that spirit got on that child. That's how it happens. That's why you gotta be very, very careful who you let your children be around, especially when they're younger. Because there are spirits, I'm telling you, there's demons associated with families, and these demons know how to attack your family. That's why you gotta make sure you don't open yourself up to things unintentionally. Of course, we got the blood of Jesus, we got the power of God, we got authority to be delivered from that. But that's how these things get in families, and that's how these things get in children.
Is white evangelicals a lot of times trumpet that you are Christian before you are black. I wanted to ask you, which are you confronted with first? And I hope I'm wording it correctly.
Yeah.
Being black or being same gender love?
I reject the premise of the question.
Okay, reject.
I think even the positing of the question reinforces all of the worst parts of whiteness. Because if you are a white man, you never have to choose.
Ooh.
You're always in a position of power.
Ooh.
The further away you move from being a white man, and let's go back to the origins of the term, to be a man in this country meant that you were white, straight,
yes,
married,
yes,
Protestant,
yes,
and land owning. There were conditions to this.
Yes.
If you weren't any of those things, you didn't have the same rights as a designated man did. And what I know is that I don't. Not only do I feel like I am unable to choose, I'm not doing that work for nobody else. You got to take all of me.
Yeah.
And this is what I know is one of the challenges. White mediocrity suggests that we pick and choose, not only within ourselves, but within our community. There's so much diversity. Again, everything that exists now started in Africa. And I want us to remember, let's reclaim African ways of being. There are countries that you can go to right now where they don't have gender pronouns, where he and she don't exist. Sambufu Some, one of my favorite writers, wrote a book called The Spirit of Intimacy. Chapter 13 of the book is titled Homosexuality, the Gatekeepers. They write, in my village in West Africa, the words lesbian and gay did not exist, but the word gatekeeper did. More importantly for me, they go on to say, gatekeepers hold the space between our community, the village, and our ancestors. In most spaces, whether it's Tahiti, Turtle Island, or Hawaii, Native indigenous spaces, understand that queer people are sacred. You don't get closer to freedom without having to go through us. It is why you can't talk about civil rights in this country without naming Bayard Rustin, a black gay man who got his tooth knocked out, protesting, standing up for righteousness. He was a Quaker who understood that this is about us all celebrating and acknowledging our humanity. Marsha paying no mind Johnson. The P paying no mind was, why you all up in my business?
Don't go too fast. I got to pause right here.
Okay.
I got to pause right here because you guys.
See, I'm about to get excited.
No. But I want to drop it because I don't want to go on presumed knowledge.
Okay.
I need you all to know that Bayard Rustin was the genius behind Dr. King.
Yes, and if I can push you, when you think of him, think this is going to make some people uncomfortable. When you think of his name, think bi like bisexual. It's spelled like Bay, like the Bay, but it's Bayard Rustin. And not only, so beyond that, we would not have nonviolent civil protests if it were not for Bayard Rustin. He studied nonviolent civil protests internationally at the feet of monks and then brought that back here. He was not only Dr. King's confidant, he was a speechwriter, served as a godfather to his children, a friend to Coretta. And to a part of our earlier conversation, it was black folks in the movement who wanted to sideline him and get him out of the way, who sold him out. Go to June, Pride Month. People forget that because it's usually skinny white boys and rainbows and unicorns, right? Stuff I don't like. They not like us. We would not have Pride if it were not for a black woman, a black trans woman named Marsha P. Johnson. Trans wasn't the term at the time. She would have called herself a drag performer. There's a whole nother conversation there around the evolution of terms and language, but Marsha paid no mind Johnson, the P was, because people would ask her, who are you? And she was like, pay that no mind. Why are you, if you're not loving on me, why are you concerned about some things that actually shouldn't concern you? And this is a black woman who was a sex worker, who organized community started an organization called STAR to make sure that children who were cast away had access to stable housing, to the medical services that they need. We've always shown up in these roles. And if we don't find ways to reject the things that whiteness continues to push upon us and reclaim African ways of being, we will die under the weight of the system that is designed to benefit them. This is when Brian Stevenson says systems work exactly as designed. This goes back to me saying that I refuse to do the work of trying to separate important parts of what make me whole.
And so I'll stop right there. That interview is long. If you want to go find it, I'll put a link to it in the description. Queer people are sacred. That's what that man said. Queer people are sacred. He mentioned Bayard Rustin, the one that helped Dr. King. He mentioned a drag queen who was prominent in the civil rights movement. Don't you see what they're doing? They're laying the groundwork for black people. And he also talked about this African spirituality stuff. He's doing some syncretism, talking about our ancestors. Don't you see what's going on? I'm going to keep talking about it until people really get it. There's a push. The agenda is there if you want to see it. To quit the black church, to get the black Christians and black people away from the real Jesus into this African spirituality stuff, this Yoruba, Oshun, and all this stuff, this African goddess and gods worship and all this stuff. He talked about the gatekeepers between our ancestors and us. That's all intended to get us away from biblical values. Like that preacher at the beginning talking about fornication doesn't mean having sex before marriage. The devil is pushing all of this perversion. It started with the sexual revolution, and now it's making its way and it's pivoting to what he really wanted, which is to get us into this all kind of lasciviousness and all kind of nastiness and filthiness that was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, going on in the days of Noah. That's where we're headed. And unfortunately, too many black pastors are so culturally based, they're church plant pastors, that they don't see what they're being used for, the agenda that they're ascribing to. We have to continue to speak the truth in love. I don't hate anyone. I don't hate anyone because of the way they live. I love you, and I pray that your eyes be open. You come out of that sin just like any other sin somebody may be in. Stealing, lying, cheating, gambling, anything like that, gluttony. They're all the same. And the power of God and the blood of Jesus and the word of God can deliver you from that, if you want that deliverance. But if you go to a church like Jamal Bryant's church or that guy at the beginning, you're not going to be delivered because they condone you living in your sin. Yeah, you can come to church as you are, but you don't stay as you are. Jesus told those people to go and sin no more. Let me know what you all think in the comments. Queer people are sacred. This is how black pastors are gaslighting black churches and black Christians to accept perversion as love. We're not victims. We are empowered for greatness.